Hello, thank you for joining us this Saturday morning. My name is Jenny Buddenborg, and I am a senior city planner with the City of Denver's Community Planning and Development Department. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce Lulu, our interpreter, who will provide instructions on how you can listen in Spanish. Go ahead, Lulu.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, my name is Lulu, and I am with the Community Language Cooperative, and I am here because the organizers of this event have made a commitment to language justice. What that means is that we want to create a space where everyone can participate and engage in the language of their heart or the language that they feel most comfortable in. To create this space, we will use simultaneous interpretation. And when I finish saying this in Spanish, we will turn on interpretation and you will see a globe icon that says interpretation. And if you don't see it because you are connected from a phone or a tablet, you can click on the three dots or the part that says more, select language and choose either English or Spanish and mute original audio so you don't hear both languages at the same time. If you are bilingual, feel free to listen to everyone in their language. One last important thing, please consider that Spanish is about 20% more than English. So to facilitate interpretation, please speak in a comfortable pace, like do not rush. So one person also please speak at a time. And if you are not actively speaking, please keep your microphone on mute. Hola, mi nombre es Lulu de Community Language Cooperative y estamos aquí porque los organizadores de este evento se han comprometido con la justicia del lenguaje. Lo que esto significa es que queremos crear un espacio donde todos puedan participar e involucrarse en el idioma de su corazón o en el idioma en el que se sientan más cómodos. Usaremos la interpretación simultánea para crear este espacio y cuando termine de decir esto, entonces usted va a ver un icono de globo que dice interpretación. Si no ve el icono de globo porque está conectándose desde su teléfono o tableta, haga clic en los tres puntos o en la parte donde dice More y seleccione el lenguaje, escogiendo el salón de inglés o español según sea su preferencia. Si es bilingüe, puede escuchar a todos en su idioma. Una vez que haya hecho su selección, puede hacer clic en silenciar audio original para que lo escuche ambos idiomas al mismo tiempo. Si tiene alguna pregunta, la puede hacer en el salón del chat. If you have any questions, you can ask in the chat room. We can now turn on interpretation and select the language. Once you make your selection, I will check to make sure you can hear me by giving me a thumbs up. Podemos encender ahora la interpretación.
Great, thank you, Lulu. All right, well, welcome again, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As I mentioned, my name is Jenny Buddenborg, and I am a senior city planner with Denver's Community Planning and Development Department, with the great fortune to manage this first of its kind project for the city of Denver. I'm pleased to be joined by Mayor Michael Hancock, Councilwomen Jamie Torres and Amanda Sandoval, Laura Aldrete, Executive Director of the Community Planning and Development Department, Rowena Alegria, Chief Storyteller for the city of Denver, and Nikki Gonzalez, PhD Project Consultant. We are thrilled to be here with you today to share an exciting project being led by the city's Landmark Preservation Program to preserve Denver's Latino and Chicano history. The project is the creation of a Denver Latino Chicano historic context. This guiding document will help us understand the deep and vibrant history of Denver's Latino Chicano peoples and the significant historic places connected to that history, so we can identify ways to recognize, protect, and celebrate those places and the heritage they represent. To kick us off, I'd like to turn it over to Laura Aldrete. You're on mute, Laura.
Thank you, Jenny. Buenos días a todos. Good morning, everyone. Gracias por venir a la reunión para discutir la historia de Denver y población latino aquí en Denver. I just want to welcome everyone and thank you for attending this morning. I am, as Jenny mentioned, I am the Executive Director of Planning and Development for the City and County of Denver. And I am thrilled that this department has taken on this project, the first of its kind. Just as a native of Denver and a Latina here from Denver, the meaning is great to me, and I'm excited to hear this. Let the stories come out about our history here in Denver, and moving up through, our evolution as a community here in Denver. With that, I would just like to thank Councilwomen Sandoval and Torres, who have supported us in this effort. We were a little shy on funding, and they both stepped up to the plate, ensuring that we could do the research as deep as we needed to, as well as provide for translation, which is paramount, obviously, to this effort. With that, I'd also just like to welcome Mayor Michael Hancock and thank him for coming this morning. I believe he has a few words he'd like to say. So I'll turn it over to you, Mayor.
Thanks, Laura. I'm at another event, so I stepped away and forgive me for having the mask on. But I want to say to you and the entire department, to Councilwoman Sandoval and Councilwoman Torres, thank you for your leadership. And just simply say this: there's nothing more important we can be doing than what we're talking about right now. The reality is that what Rowena Alegria does today out of Human Rights and Community Partnerships grew out of a conversation that many of us had several years ago to begin talking about this question around gentrification and involuntary displacement. And as we did our research, one of the things we learned very quickly from the people is that equal to losing our sense of place is losing our culture and the stories that make us who we are. And so just several months ago, we started this process of thinking about how we might begin to encapsulate, before I leave office, the very wonderful histories of Latino and Chicano communities, as well as the African-American community, and make sure that everyone knew where they could go to get that history. Not only do we want the stories told through Rowena, but we want people to acknowledge and to respect those destinations. As we began that process, we learned about this process and the conversations around this out of CPD. And so we are proud to enfold and be a part of this conversation, to learn, to work to protect, because as I close, I'll tell you, we have an awesome responsibility to make sure these stories aren't lost. And more importantly, make sure that the locations and the communities that really tell our story and our history are not lost as well. And so I want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank everyone for being a part of this conversation. And I look forward to the outcomes and how we can partner to make sure that generations that we will never meet will know about the Latino and Chicano histories in our community and beyond. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hancock. Thank you, Laura. And now I'd like to introduce Councilwomen Jamie Torres and Amanda Sandoval. Both councilwomen, as Laura has already mentioned, have supported this project from the early stages. In addition to welcoming you today, they will each share an historic place in Denver that is meaningful to them and represents their cultural heritage. These will provide examples of the type of information we would love to hear from you to help us develop the Denver Latino Chicano historic context. So please welcome Councilwoman Torres.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer and Laura, and thank you for your support, Mayor. Good morning, buenos dias. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm honored to share in this opportunity to kick off a project that is long overdue in Denver. I would first like to start with a land acknowledgement, if I may. We acknowledge that the land on which we reside is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We honor elders past, present, and future, and those who have stewarded this land throughout generations. We also recognize that government, academic, and cultural institutions were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. May this acknowledgement demonstrate a commitment to working to dismantle ongoing legacies of oppression and inequities and recognize the current and future contributions of Indigenous communities in Denver. Thank you so much. That acknowledgement was adopted by Denver City Council last year, and it becomes our commitment to make sure that erasure not only stops, but is reversed. And we begin to recognize the communities and the people that came before us. What this effort really got me thinking about was the idea of sacred space, beyond important buildings or notable architects, but sacred. So what makes something sacred in my community? It's created through tradition, like influencing events, ritual. Yes, I will slow down. It is created through tradition, life influencing events, ritual, gathering spaces, and movements. A park isn't just a park if it's where you appreciate and gasp at the pristine view of your city, where your grandfather gathered with his buddies as teens, probably listening to the Platters and Elvis Presley, where you spent your childhood summers in the pool and running up the hills when your mom worked at the rec center, where you celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, where you had your first kiss, where you spread your grandfather's ashes when he passed away, and where you held your first event as a city councilwoman. City sacred spaces are meaningful, and that's what this project gives us an opportunity to do, is to reach back into our memories and those of our families, to identify our sacred spaces so that we can honor and recognize them for our kids and the city's awareness. The picture here is already a landmark and it's preserved. This was where my grandparents were married. This used to be the neighborhood where my grandmother was raised. It is special, it's sacred. Even if a sacred space you're thinking about has been replaced, maybe it's been replaced by a post office, but it was where the Chicano movement in Denver is rooted. The city deserves to know these roots. The Crusade building is no longer there, but that doesn't mean it needs to be forgotten. I saw for the first time a state monument marking the edge of Fort Weld in my district, an Army fort in the Lama Lincoln Park area, which was where the Cheyenne and Arapaho leaders gathered for peace talks. 2 months later, those peace talks were ignored and the Sand Creek Massacre devastated peaceful tribes. We mark spaces that have harmed. It's time to mark spaces that gave us life and power. It's an honor to kick off this important event in Denver, and I look forward to context studies for all of our communities and all of our contributions. And I'd like to pass it over to my colleague, Councilwoman Amanda Sandoval now.
Thank you, Councilman Torres. That was beautifully put. So my sacred space is Guadalupe Church in the north side, where I made my first communion. I was baptized there. The priest who used to, was the priest there, Jose Lara, is my godfather. And it was where I learned about social justice movements. It was where I went when I was having a hard time. My babysitter across the street, that the house is no longer there. It's a parking lot now. The city and county of Denver own it. But my babysitter, I was babysat there. I would go there after school. I would go there before school. Both my parents worked. And I remember when I was having a hard time at her house, I would run across the street and I would go open those wooden doors and I would see the mural of the Virgencita, Our Lady of Guadalupe, who has played a significant role in my life and in the life of a lot of people in the Latino culture. So I am excited to be here today. And my virtual background is a place at La Raza Park, officially La Raza Park now, after the community worked on changing that name for decades. And it is a mural by David, and it talks about the history of the quest to come to the United States. And if you have not been able to go to the Kiosco, go to the Kiosco at La Raza Park, and the mural is inside of the Kiosco, and that's the sunlight that's coming down. So there's no illumination, there's no lights, it's just naturally lit, and it's a beautiful story. So those are my two sacred spaces, is La Raza Park and Guadalupe, and it reflects a lot of what I did in my life and what I was taught is power to the people. And this project is a way to give power and a voice to my community and our community. And especially in Northwest Denver, where gentrification has happened and displacement and murals are no longer there. It's important we document this for our next future generation, my kids and our grandkids. And it was exciting when I was able to partner with Councilwoman Torres and we were able to use some of our budget and our fund to have this project advance and move forward and to be here with you today. So I look forward to learning from all of you and learning about all the different sacred spaces throughout Northwest Denver and throughout Denver as a whole. Because what I always say is what's good for Northwest Denver is good for Denver. So thank you, CPD, thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sandoval, and thank you, Councilwoman Torres. It's great to see the places that are so meaningful to you. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about what this project is and why we're doing it. We're going to share how you can take part in it. And then we're going to have a Q&A session. Throughout the presentation, we will be asking you several questions that you can answer using the chat function at the bottom of your screen. For the question and answer session, we'll use the Q&A function, also found at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to type questions in the Q&A screen as we move through the agenda. I want to note that we will use the terms Chicano and Latino and likely others as the project progresses and community members self-identify in other ways to help acknowledge the diverse history of the many peoples who have called Denver home in this context, whether their roots are indigenous or come from elsewhere, recognizing that one label does not fit all. So let's begin with a question for you. What historic places in Denver do you think of when considering your Latino Chicano heritage? Councilwomen Torres and Sandoval gave us a couple great examples. A few more might be a specific gathering place or a site where an important event happened or another place of worship. Take a moment to consider this question and then type your answer in the chat box. You should see the chat box if you hover on the bottom of your screen, similar to what you see here on the screen in the upper right. If you click that icon, a box will appear for you to type your answer. And as those come in, Nikki is going to share a few of the responses that we'll be receiving. So we'll give you guys a minute or so to type in your answers. Anything yet, Nikki?
No, nothing yet.
Hopefully people can find the chat box, okay?
Right. And just be sure to hit enter so it goes up into the chat after you're done typing.
We know you guys have some great ideas to share.
Chubby's, oh, that's a good one. Chubby's restaurant. Oh, people are typing in the Q&A.
Oh, I thought that might be confusing.
Yeah. Oh, Servicios, the original location at 41st and Tejon, Boulevard Elementary, the high rise, St. Cajetan's, both old and new, Su Teatro, La Alma Lincoln Park, of course, Denver Inner City Parish in La Alma Lincoln Park, the Neighborhood Epic mural in Highlands. Let's see what else we have. Atzlan Rec Center, of course. It's a good one. Berkeley Park.
We'll keep on throwing your answers in there. In the Q&A or in the chat is fine. We'll have record of all of these. So even if we don't call all of them out, we'll be able to capture them. So please keep on dropping them in there. And we'll dive in then to talking about what the project is. So this is a first of its kind project in Denver that will create an historic context for Denver's Latino Chicano history. And historic context is a document that helps us understand what significant historic places exist and what makes them important. So we can then identify ways to recognize, protect, and celebrate them. This context study will provide a broad historical overview on the citywide settlement and development patterns of Denver Chicanos Latinos through the 1990s and identify historic places connected to that culture. Some of Denver's Latino Chicano historic places are already well known, and some of you guys just put into the chat and Q&A box, which is great, like the Aztlan Theater and the La Alma mural by Emmanuel Martinez and the La Alma Recreation Center. And some have already been historically designated for their significance to this culture, like Councilwoman Torres mentioned earlier, like St. Cajetan's Church. But there is much more out there that we just don't know about. And that's the purpose of this project, to learn and share the comprehensive history and historic places of Denver's Chicano and Latino peoples. Through this project, it is anticipated that we will identify several property types associated with Denver Latino Chicano history, including sites related to civil rights movements and leaders, places of worship, cultural arts facilities, community gathering spaces, murals, residences, and businesses. The context will identify historical themes and areas of significance like social history, art, architecture, education, religion, ethnic heritage, and commerce. So here's another question for you guys to consider and help us with. What historical topics should we cover that haven't already been mentioned? We've identified civil rights movements and leaders, like those connected to the Crusade for Justice, cultural and artistic heritage through murals and spaces like Su Teatro. What else should we know about? Like before, please type your answer into the chat box, and Nikki will do her lovely job of facilitating what's coming in and sharing that with all of us.
Happy to do that. Oh, this one is a good one. So there will probably be a need to reconcile the history of place with current socioeconomic issues. How will the city reconcile these issues? So an example is environmental issues in Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea. Very good, very important issue. Student movements, again, a very, very good topic. Community leadership, highlighting sports achievements and athletes by Latinx people in Denver. That's great. Small businesses. This is really helpful, you all. Social justice education, very good.
Great. We'll keep those coming, guys. Those are very helpful. So why are we doing this project? The Latino Chicano Historic Context will be the first in a series of contexts to study underrepresented communities in Denver. So we would like to also do these contexts for groups like African Americans, Asian Americans, American Indians, and LGBTQ. The overall project goal is to ensure that all aspects of Denver's history are recognized and preserved. A large part of Denver's historic fabric is the stories of the diverse persons and groups that make up its vibrant history. Denver's current portfolio of Denver landmarks, which are sites designated for their historic, architectural, and cultural significance, is largely slanted to a single demographic that does not adequately reflect diverse ethnic and cultural groups in our city. Many historic places associated with these groups are being lost at an alarming rate, in part due to Denver's rapid development pace. This historic context is needed to guide work to preserve all parts of Denver's history. How Denver's history is preserved happens in a number of ways. Historic designation is just one available tool. The historic context will also help inform our citywide building survey, Discover Denver, provide critical information when we assess demolition applications for properties and potentially save them from the wrecking ball, and identify recommendations and neighborhood plans that guide the growth and evolution of Denver's neighborhoods. These are just a few ways that an historic context can be used by the city to ensure we are being inclusive with our historic preservation and planning efforts. The historic context is also a resource for the Denver community at large, for you. It can help your efforts to protect and recognize important historic places. This could lead to a community-led effort to historically designate a property or a set of properties, for example. It could also drum up support to rehabilitate a building like the Aslan Theater. Once complete, the Latino Chicano Historic Context Report will be made available on the city's website in both English and Spanish. We will also have an interactive online map where you can easily see the significant history of Denver's Latino and Chicano peoples. The whole project should wrap up by the end of this year. One of the more unique pieces of this project is the community engagement that will help inform the context study. I'm going to hand it over to Nikki Gonzalez, who's our project consultant, who you've already heard from, who will tell you more about this and share ways that you can participate.
Thank you, Jenny. Buenos dias, everyone. How wonderful it is to be here with you today. Thank you all for your interest in this important project. As Jenny said, my name is Nikki Gonzalez, and I am a history professor at Regis University, and I sit on the State Historians Council. One of the areas of expertise that I have is Colorado's Chicano or Mexican American history, And one of my great joys is public history. So I'm absolutely delighted to be part of the community engagement piece of this project. And I want to express my deep gratitude to the mayor and to Councilwoman Torres and Sandoval for their support of this important project. Indeed, the emphasis on community engagement is one of the more unique aspects of this project. We believe it sets our project apart from similar ones across the country. Only in listening and learning from members of our Denver Latino and Chicano communities do we begin to more fully understand our history. It is our engagement with the community that will provide the rich histories, rich stories that define our history as a people in the city of Denver. By engaging folks like you all, and hopefully people in your networks, we can go beyond the traditional historical sources, which don't always get at that richness of our history. I will have you know, however, that we do have a team of historians looking at the more traditional archival sources throughout the city of Denver and really archives throughout the state. Both are needed. And the stories, artifacts, and artifacts that you all share with us about your and your family's histories in Denver will directly guide the more traditional archival research. And eventually they will guide the writing of the Latino Chicano Historic Context Report, which Jenny just mentioned. This will become a document that will be available to the public for all to read. And so I want you to think of this project as one that will tell our story, not only for ourselves and our future generations, but for outside communities as well, who may rely on stereotypes or misunderstandings of our community and our history. So what kinds of information are we looking for in our engagement with the community? Jenny mentioned some of the themes that will likely provide the framework for this project, and I just want to reemphasize them and to get you all thinking about how we tell our history. Often in my work, I talk with members of our community and they don't think their lives or the lives of their ancestors are anything special, but indeed they are, and they are very important. As African-American writer James Baldwin wrote on many occasions, we carry our history with us. We indeed are our history. And the experiences of our ancestors are part of us. We carry their struggles, their resilience, their accomplishments with us. And we want to capture as many of these as possible. Ours is a history of migrations at different times. So some of us come from families deeply rooted in Denver, and others are more recent immigrants. We want to know when and why your families have arrived in Denver. Ours is a history of labor and industry. I always tell my dad, we built this city. And so we want to know what your family did for work, what they did for play. Ours is a history of political engagement, whether it be Latinos and Chicanos running for elected office, advocating for fair treatment in schools and by the police, or marching in the streets. We want to hear these stories of resistance and advocacy. Ours is a history also of cultural expression through the arts. Tell us all about how our community has expressed itself on the landscape and through our gatherings. Our places of worship, our deep spirituality, and our schools and sports have shaped our neighborhoods, shaped us and our city. We have been a community whose resilience through hard times and struggles against racism are written on the landscape. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but these are the types of stories that we want to capture. And these stories come in many forms from you. One of my personal favorites are the oral histories that are passed down from elders who are still with us and from ancestors who have passed on. Many date back to the earliest days of Latino and Chicano history in Denver. I'll share a bit of my family's oral history just as an example. This is one story that my dad shared with me and my sisters. He grew up in Globeville in the 50s and 60s, and he and his two brothers were not allowed to swim in the public pool except on the days right before they were to drain it and clean it. There were signs that said no Mexicans, no Negroes, and no dogs allowed. So he and his wild brothers would jump the fence at night and swim for free. So this is a tiny window into an era when exclusion and racism against our community were the norm. And it's also a story of resistance. If you look at the slide here on the left, there's a photograph taken in the 1920s, it's estimated in the 1920s, of Sacred Heart Parish at 28th and Larimer. And this parish, again, is a little window into Mexican-American Chicano Latino history. With World War II migration to Denver, a once Irish and Italian neighborhood and parish became Mexican American. And in 1948, this is where my mother was baptized. So we want to know more stories like this from all of you, which fill in the gaps of traditional sources. So how will we do this? And this is the important part here. We have spent a lot of time designing an engagement plan that emphasizes close collaboration with the Chicano and Latino community leaders and members at large. This meeting is part of that. Specifically, we have developed a structure of advisors and connectors throughout the city, made up of community leaders who are providing advice to help ensure that our engagement is inclusive and well-informed. Jenny, could you advance this slide, please? These leaders will provide content for the context and assist in engaging the broader community with our Maptionnaire survey. And we will put the link, the live link, into the chat and you can click on it. But this is a survey tool, very easy to navigate and very fun actually to engage with. And it will prompt you to think of memories, think of places that have been important to you, and it will capture those stories. It also enables you to upload documents, photos, newspaper clippings, anything that you can scan. So artifacts that will kind of complete or enrich the stories that you're able to tell us. And so again, the link is in the chat, and we ask that you please share this widely via social media, via your network, various networks and so forth, because the more responses we have, the richer and more complete the story we can tell. In addition to the Maptionnaire survey, we also have the I Am Denver oral history component, which is a multimedia storytelling project that engages community and gives voice to underrepresented residents. But before we dive into the I Am Denver component of the context project, let's do a brief question again. Okay, so please again, put your answers in the chat, and we'd like you to respond to what areas of the city tell us your Latino or Chicano history. And you can use these names, these quadrants, or I guess it's more than quadrants of the city. Or you can tell us more specifically what neighborhood or what sub-neighborhood that might be dear to you. So go ahead and put that in the chat right now. Someone said Curtis Park, Mestizo Park, Westwood neighborhood, Barnum. This is all good. Marley, City Park neighborhood, Athmar. Too bad we don't have a map that highlights, that lights up. Sun Valley, very good. The East Side. West Denver. Okay, so North Denver, of course, thank you. And so you can continue adding responses to the chat as we go along. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Rowena Alegria, who will tell us about the I Am Denver project. Ro, you're on.
Thank you, Nikki. Buenos dias, bienvenidos. I'm Rowena Alegria, Chief Storyteller for the City and County of Denver, and I am thrilled to be here today and be working on this project. And I'm so excited that you took time out of your busy weekend to join us here. I am founder and director of the Denver Office of Storytelling and the I Am Denver Storytelling Project, which is the first program of its kind anywhere, a groundbreaking effort that uses resident storytelling for social impact. Through storytelling or oral history, the goal of the Office of Storytelling is to preserve the culture and history of Denver in the ways that historic preservation preserves buildings, which is exactly what we'll be doing for the Latino Chicano historic context. We capture oral histories via video to provide a platform for those voices typically missing from the narrative. And we do it with authentic resident voices, which means no narrators and no voiceovers. The best way to explain is to show you. Take a look at the intro for a film we put together about how the internment of Japanese and Japanese Americans during World War II resulted in a strong Japanese American community here in Denver.
Imagine that the government comes to you and says that in 7 days you must vacate your house. What do you do with your property? What do you do with your crops that are in the field? What do you do about your pets?
Fear. Fear, ignorance. 120,000 plus Japanese and Japanese Americans were taken from their families, from their homes, had to leave their businesses.
It was shameful to be in a camp like criminals.
These are American citizens, just like you're an American citizen.
After Pearl Harbor, the government put Japanese Americans into camp under the pretext that it was impossible to tell the loyal from the disloyal. They said, we simply can't tell, so let's just lock them all up.
People were
If you want to see the rest of 1,000 Paper Cranes, please go to imdenver.org and look under documentaries. It's there and available. For the Latino Chicano historic context, I Am Denver will sit in on historian Nikki Gonzalez's interviews and focus groups with the goal of identifying the handful of stories that will help us create a mini documentary of more than 100 years of Denver Latino Chicano history. That film will premiere along with the historic context around the end of the year, hopefully at a public screening and event. Cross your fingers. The I Am Denver team will also be reviewing the surveys for great story ideas. So when you fill out the survey, please look for this page with this beautiful mural, also from David, and include your contact information so we will be able to reach you. And I'll put some of these links into the chat when I'm finished speaking. I already know we will identify far more stories that we can possibly include in a short film. But the Office of Storytelling and the I Am Denver Storytelling Project will continue to tell our stories. And believe me, we'll be collecting ideas for future projects. We're also working on another effort that would allow you to share your stories via video. So please follow us on social at all City of Denver accounts so you're up to date on the latest information. And same with the CPD newsletter, we will be sure and get that out once we have it finalized and ready to go. Finally, to see more I Am Denver, please visit imdenver.org. And if you'd like to reach me, please email imdenver@denvergov.org. Thank you 100 times over. And now we're going to move on to the next question for you to answer in the chat again. Which Latino Chicano stories have been missing from Denver's history? Which stories would make that history more complete? So please jump into the chat and put those answers in. I'm going to go to my documents so that I could pull up these links, and I will also add those into the chat. Thanks. And I'm going to let Nikki take over to answer some of the, or to give some of the answers that we've been receiving from the question. Nikki?
Sure, thanks, Ro. And thank you everyone for putting your comments and questions into the chat. And I can start answering questions. Let's see, as soon as I get notification of that.
Nikki, do you want to give some feedback on what's being dropped into the chat for this question?
Oh yeah, I don't see too much. Oh, Corky Gonzalez, social justice, Luna family, art and sports. The history and contributions of the Chicana LGBTQ community. Oh, that's a really good one. Yes, that story has not been told. Su Teatro, sure. Not a lot of people know the history behind Su Teatro. Food, Chubby's again. Somebody's hungry, making me hungry. Yes. Arturo, do you want to unmute yourself? Arturo Rodriguez, and you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera and ask your question. Oh, he wants to know what my role is in this project. My role is to help with some of the, I'm doing some of the archival research into the Latino and Chicano history in Denver. And I'm also helping out with the community engagement part of it. So we'll be holding small like interviews and focus groups with people. And I'll also be helping to analyze the information that comes through the survey. So, okay, and Mr. Rodriguez, if you would like to say anything more, you're promoted to the panelist status, so you can unmute and ask your question if you have any further questions. Okay, and Esteban Ortiz also has asked a question. Sorry, this is a little clunky, you guys. The survey will be open. So Jenny, would you answer that question? How long will the survey be open?
Sure. So it's actually going to be open for quite some time. So it's live now if you guys want to jump in there right after this meeting and fill it out. And it'll run all the way through the end of June. So there'll be plenty of time to be able to provide responses. And please feel free to share it with others too. We'd love to gather as much information as we can. And we think this will be a good amount of time for people to have to be able to respond to the survey.
Yes. And Luis Torres, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment? I think it's Dr. Torres. Are you there? Okay.
Hello?
Yes, please do. Dr. Torres.
Yes, this is Luis Torres. Hi. Thank you for, first of all, thank you for what you are doing. This is excellent, and as has been stated, long overdue. So thanks a lot. I recommended a few things. I don't know if you have a particular question. The first one I would advise would be what was called Mexican diggings in 1858 in the Platte River. Because of the name, you can figure out there were Mexicans who were digging there, right? Mexican diggings, and they discovered gold, and word got back east, and the next year a lot of people from back east came, and that's one of the major reasons why Denver was established in 1859, the following year. So I think that's very important. I mentioned one that might seem unusual, but the Union Station downtown, because during and after the Mexican Civil War of 1910 and 1920, there were tens of thousands of Mexicanos, actually close to 1 million, that left Mexico because of the effects of the Civil War, including my father, my uncle, and 2 aunts. But Union Station was where most of them came in. There were no cars then. I mean, they couldn't have driven up here. There were a few cars, but they couldn't have driven up here. So that's how a lot of the population here in Denver, including the west side, and what is now Larimer Square, was a Mexicano community. And then the west side and La Alma Lincoln Park. So I would suggest that St. Cajetan's is already recommended, and it has to be, of course. I think the history of St. Cajetan's is important. I'll finish in about 1 minute. I just sent a note about Mount Evans, the mountain just west of Denver. I don't know if it would be possible for this project to do this, but that name has to be changed. It's named after the governor who was the governor during when the Sand Creek Massacre happened, and he has been linked to the Sand Creek Massacre as a major contributor. There's a very good study out of the University of Denver, but there are other studies. So those are some of the items, some of the comments I would suggest. Crusade for Justice, of course, including the Chicano Youth Liberation Conference in 1969. But I come back to Mount Evans, it's a shame that that place is still, that mountain is still named after John Evans. I advise, and I would be glad to help with this, I advise a study about Evans's role. Again, I think that's a very good study out of the University of Denver. There are others, but frankly, from my heart, that's the first thing that I would suggest. Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Torres, for all of that. In regard to the stories that you shared first, that's exactly what we're after, is those stories that have been covered up over time. That story about Union Station, nobody ever associates that our population with Union Station. So thank you for sharing that. And in regard to Mount Evans, I also happen to be on the governor's advisory council for renaming geographical locations and features, and that Mount Evans is at the top of the list of what we're considering. So thank you for that comment. Okay, let's see, Nita Gonzalez, you're asking questions about interviews for people without access to tech. And I am so grateful that you're part of the community advisory group that we've gathered. We will have to figure out how to address that. And hopefully, depending on COVID, we're hoping to be able to hold some of those meetings or interviews in person as well. And Ro, did you want to speak to that too?
I agree completely that we need to come up with other solutions. And with my team for the filming of stories, we absolutely hope to do those in person and would love to include elders in that and make sure that some of those stories are told. Like I said, there's no way we'll be able to go take a team to interview everybody, but the solution that we're working on will hopefully help to close that gap. And it will require some help potentially from, two generations working together, because that solution is an app that we're hoping to get out. But the goal is absolutely to capture as many voices as we can and to not let technology be a hurdle.
Thank you, Ro. And we have a question about the labels, the terms that we're using. It's suggested that we use the term Indigenous for referring to the Indigenous peoples of this region. And yes, we will be very attentive to the language we use. And we know that this language is loaded, it's fraught in some cases, and it's also very important. It's part of somebody's identity. So we will be very conscientious when we're working with labels and language. So thank you for that question. There's another question here. Can we rename Rhino or rename to its original name? I don't know. I think that's probably a question for the city. If anyone would like to jump in and answer that question.
Sure, I'll jump in. This is Jenny again. Yeah, I think the information that we gather, through this historic context can help with those future conversations, but this project itself won't necessarily rename places, but it will provide the information that's critical to understand the history of a place and what might lead towards that.
And I can help provide some context. Rhino is a metro, it's a district, it's a type of taxing district that was created, and it has no association, it's just its boundaries, which overlay part of Swansea and part of 5 Points. But I always refer to the neighborhood in their original terms. So the neighborhood of 5 Points is the neighborhood of 5 Points, and the neighborhood of Swansea is Swansea, and Elyria is Elyria. But that boundary for that metro district incorporates those neighborhoods. So it's just it's a term that's thrown out often and misused to talk about the neighborhoods, but it's not the neighborhood, it's an art district.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sandoval, for that answer. There's another question here, or yes, it said, let's make sure we acknowledge the women just as much as the men, okay? Absolutely, and that's another reason to do a project like this, because women's voices and actions and contributions have often been marginalized. So yes, tell us. We are interested in those stories, definitely. Here's a question here. Will there be community meetings in person to follow? We're hoping so, right, Jenny?
It's a good question. And COVID, as you guys know, has thrown a lot of wrenches in the works for many projects. So because there's still a lot of unknown in terms of what is going to unveil itself through COVID over the next few months, and our community engagement will end probably around June or July. Right now, we don't have any in-person meetings planned, just to follow public health orders and safety precautions related to COVID. But as we had mentioned earlier, we are looking at ways to work around that as much as we can and make sure that everybody has access to the project to be able to share their stories and information. So we are constantly thinking about ways to kind of work around that hurdle that we have.
Let me also add that the survey, it's not just your typical survey. There is a lot of opportunity to tell your own story and send in information that contributes to that story, send in names and places that are important to make sure that the story is much more complete than it ever has been before. So I highly encourage you to take the time to fill out the survey and make sure that you're the part of the story that's really important to you gets relayed to us. We will cover as much of that story as we can possibly cover. But if you don't fill that out, I mean, how are we going to know that, you know, your family's story, the details of that, or how to reach you about that story? We need you to participate to make sure that we have that information so that we can work to capture those stories. It's really important. Like I said, when I was speaking earlier, not only to give us all of that information, to give us your contact information so that we can follow up with you and make sure that that story gets included. And we won't be able to do that follow up with everybody, but we will do it with as many people as we possibly can.
Thank you. Thanks, Ro, for emphasizing that. And I'll just add to that, and please upload any materials that you can. I mean, those are gems, and they might be sitting in old shoe boxes in your closets or maybe crates in your attic, but those are where I mean, I'm speaking as a historian here, but those are where the treasures are. You'd be amazed at what you can find. So we're very interested in those as well. Oh yes, Lorenzo Ramirez just submitted a question. What about submitting historic photos? Yes, please. And if you can include like what it is, who's in the photo, that would be wonderful too. But oh my gosh, that would be great.
Nikki, I just wanted to toss out there too. Oh, sorry, Ro. I don't know if we mentioned this yet, but the survey is available in both Spanish and English too. So I just want to throw that out there to make sure people know that. That's an important piece too. Sorry, Ro.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I don't know, maybe Jenny, you know this answer. I don't know if you could put video clips in the survey, but if you have video clips of, you know, marchas or any of that, you know, historic dance performances, those kinds of things, those will be hugely valuable for the putting together of the film. So even if you can't upload them, I don't know what the capacity is on the survey for video. Please note in your responses that you have those available so that we can, again, reach back to you and make sure that we get those from you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ro. I'm not sure if we can do movie clips on there. I'll double check. But in the meantime, if people have any that they want to share, you can email them directly to me. And I'll ask Evan, one of our behind the scenes guys, to drop my email address in the chat. You guys can send them directly that way.
Well, sometimes the video clips are
too large
and they won't email. But if you have those, you can also contact me at imdenver@denvergov.org. And what we have the capacity to send you a Dropbox link where you can upload those video files.
Great. Antonia Leva, you asked a question, is there space or room for volunteers who would like to help with interviews? I would say that you can even conduct your own interviews like Ro just said, and then contact us if you have a clip, or yes, please contact us if you're interested in volunteering. I personally love volunteers, so be happy to talk with you.
I do love the idea, though, that you mentioned, Nikki, that people can conduct their own interviews and share that information with us. That's great. And that's one of the things we've been looking at a little bit more in terms of how we can promote that for the project. So we are looking at an app that could assist in that way. Again, technology, but yeah, I think it's great if people can conduct interviews and then share that information with us for sure.
Okay. And I'd like to ask Angelica Moreno if she would unmute and ask her question live.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Angelica. Yes, please.
Hi. Thank you. Yeah, I was just asking, I moved to Denver 2 years ago. So I'm very new, but I have a strong foundation in my own Latina identity, and I want to be able to contribute to this project in some ways. I'm just wondering, how can I get involved?
Yes, I think a great place for you to start. And it doesn't, I mean, the fact that you just moved here a couple years ago, you still have a wealth of knowledge. So please first start by filling out the survey on Maptioneer. That would be a great place to start. And we can go from there. Any other questions here? Okay. I want to make sure I'm not missing any questions here. Okay, one person asked, Councilwoman Torres, you asked, you would like to interview your grandmother. Can we send you some questions? Yes, and you can even use the questions on the Maptioneer survey. I think that would be a great place to start. Thank you for that question. Oh, I like this question. I'm going to go ahead and ask Arturo Rodriguez. Asks, how is this project connecting with working class? Please share our outreach plan. If we're, okay, so Arturo, would you like to unmute yourself and ask that question? I think that's a really rich question. Mr. Rodriguez? Okay.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, we can.
Yes, my concern, well, first of all, congratulations on the project. I feel like I'm in an introduction to Chicano studies class again, teaching. After 42 years, you kind of miss it, but you don't because you're always teaching. But anyway, my concern is what is the plan to reach those voices that we always say we're going to include? For instance, I have been talking to people about this since I heard about it. And when I heard about it was right after the advisory committee to change La Raza Park. I got an email from another council person. And they said, well, they have this position open, but it's closing tomorrow. I said, oh, that's nice. So, but please help us find a historian. So what I'm getting at is that those of us that are engaged and so forth, we get the info, we get it sooner or later, but I'm concerned about the voices that are very important. For instance, 52 years, I've been documenting the history of La Raza Park, North Denver. A lot of time, I'll give you an example. A lot of time people don't remember that 6 months after we took over La Raza Park in June, to kind of pressure Joe Chancho, we said, Joe, if you don't change the name of this park, we're going to change the name of Chancho Park. Now, how many people remember that? And we did it. We did a takeover of the park. We used to do a markup of the park. Park was destroyed. Name was destroyed. Chancho Park became Chicano Park. People don't know that. I was on a panel last night with in San Diego. They're having 52 years. So they're doing it online, and they had a panel of parks from Texas, Arizona, and Denver. And so I had mentioned that in terms of the history that people often overlook. Now, how did I remember that in my history? Someone said, Bones, do you remember when we had Chicano Park? And I'll be damned if I didn't. I did not. I did not have it. So I start researching it, looking for photos, putting it out there, who remembers, blah, blah, blah. And then I remember that we had Cinco de Mayo's there. No, we had Mexican Independence Day there. And what we did is we turned it into a charreada because it's a baseball field. So we said, so how can we attract these voices, these people? We said, oh, it's next to the projects. It's, you know, the 16th of September and at Chancho Park, Chicano Park. While Pat Schroeder comes up to me and she says, congratulations on this. I never knew this existed. And I said, so I'm thinking now about history and those voices like that individual that said, you know, Bones, you remember this? And so that's what I'm talking about. In 52 years, I have been able to have people, voices who people don't know. You know, they were younger people then, obviously, because I'm older. So I really hope that we put together in partnership, excuse me, in all of the different areas of this project. I have talked about this project nationally. I say, you know, Denver is really doing a good thing. I'm really, you know, I really do think that higher education institutions need to do more than what they're doing for this project, but I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what the budget is. I really don't know who's coordinating this, who got hired, but it's happening. And I'm glad to see Ro involved because she's going to get things done. She has always gotten things done, and she knows how to find those voices. So it's going to get real overwhelming, and I think we really need to do some cheerleading here. You know, we need to go to those barrio spaces, you know, where people hang out. And I'm talking about, you know, the old bars that are still in the different sides of town, you know, the parks, people are in the parks, people are circulating and so forth. You know, we really need to do some, like, bring some of the old DJs back, you know, Paul Chavez, you know, he has a show on twice a week, you know, I've been on it, you know, we talk about history, this and this and that, but we really need to do some neighbor to neighbor, vecino kinds of things. And so I'm hoping that we can do that. My two projects that I run online, we have a wealth of information, videotape that I'd be more than happy to share with you, interviews. In fact, I'm always looking for volunteers, students that are interested. It's really interesting, this Sheridan High School just did a 6-month study on the Chicano Civil Rights Movement. And one of the things they keyed in was the renaming. Now, Sheridan High School is south of Denver, a small neighborhood school. I don't know if any of the Denver schools have ever really taught the history of West High School, walkout, the takeover of La Alma Lincoln Park in 1969, La Raza Park in 1970, Mestizo Park in 1972, 1973, Glowville Swansea Park became La Gente Park, all of the rec centers that were built. I mean, that was a tremendous period in the development of people projects that came through recreation and culture, because we didn't have that then. We didn't have a space to go and do, you know, they're telling us, be well, do positive things, you know, but yet we didn't have rec centers. So that become an issue. Youth were saying, well, where are we supposed to go? All we have is this park. We said, then now it's time for us to get engaged. And that's one of the reasons why we recalled. We recalled Dimana in 73. You know, we have seven Chicano Latinas that have been, the only male that's been elected after the recall was Sal Carpio. So we've had a whole paradigm shift of leadership with Latinas and Chicanas, which is very good. But that history, you know, the first recall in the state of Colorado came out of youth practicing civics at the highest level. And we have to take this through to the Colorado Supreme Court to win that decision. Just like we had to go through numerous petitions to finally rename La Raza Park. So, we have, Chicano history, Latino history is Denver history. I told people, Denver named this park, and Denver needs to change the name of this park because the community already has. We engaged in that. We opened our arms up to Denver. And so, congratulations. You have a lot of work to do. And if I can be available to help out, let me know.
Absolutely, Mr. Rodriguez. Thank you so much for your comments. And we are doing everything we can to reach those communities that have long been ignored. I mean, that's exactly the kind of history that we're after. And we have some strategies. I mean, COVID makes it a little bit more difficult, but we're very determined to reach those communities. So thank you very much for your input. I'd like to ask Councilwoman Sidibaca if she would unmute and ask a question, please.
It's my question, right? It blanked out while you were switching me.
Yes, please.
So we have, and we've seen just in this presentation, a lot of sites have been identified in District 9 in Curtis Park and Swansea and on 16th and Downing. I'm wondering, I initially thought this was just confined to La Alma and Lincoln Park. I'm wondering if after the survey results come in, it will stretch further beyond those districts so that we can get a stakeholder group ready to identify Chicano Latino sites in D9.
So I can answer that, Nikki. This is actually a citywide project. I'm sorry if that didn't come across early on in the presentation, but the historic context is for the Latino Chicano history citywide. So it's not just a neighborhood specific or district specific.
Awesome.
So any information, Councilwoman Sidibaca, that I know you've been working hard in your district to gather that information, please share it with us and spread the word that, people within your district can participate in this project.
Awesome. Thank you. Will do. We've got lots of people lined up.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Let's see. Oh, Emmanuel Martinez would like to ask, actually, Emmanuel Martinez, would you like to unmute and make your comment, please? Okay, I just got another message that he was just asking for a plug for the La Alma Lincoln Park Historic District. So we'll make that plug for you. Thank you very much for that. And any final questions? We're at about 12:15 right now. Have a few more minutes. I just want to say how much I've appreciated all of your input today. This has been really fun. And I look forward to working with the community and with my colleagues here in the months to come.
Nikki, I just wanted to quickly respond to some of the comments that Arturo had shared earlier, especially about making sure that we are reaching as many people as possible, and other people have brought this up as well. And, this is always a really hard thing, right? Like we always want to reach as many people as we possibly can, and we try our hardest. And one way that you guys can help is by helping spread the word and encouraging people to take part in the project. So that's a big piece of it, to make sure that we really are reaching as many people as we possibly can. So I just encourage you guys and respectfully ask for your assistance in that way, because that can help this project go a long ways. And I think with the end product too, with the information that we gather, we are going to have that available online to everybody in Spanish and English, both in a written format and then in a map too. But we're hoping that this isn't just something that sits on a shelf, or it's some kind of scholarly piece that's not approachable to everybody. We're really trying to create this to be usable for everybody, not just folks like myself who work in the landmark preservation program at the city, but people who are part of the Latino Chicano community or who are just interested in it. So really making this broadly accessible to everybody throughout the city.
Absolutely. And if we could all think of this as our project together, just emphasizing the point that Jenny made about you know, we're depending on everybody to share this information with their networks and cast a wide net for as much information as we can get. I've been told that Suzanne Larimer has a question for us. So Suzanne, if you would unmute yourself, and you're welcome to ask your question.
Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Just one of my, I graduated from the Masters in Historic Preservation program last year from CU Denver, and one of my colleagues and I have been interested in the 9th Street Historic District, which is obviously part of the larger Auraria campus. And so we've been digging into some of the history of that. And so we just wanted to participate in this webinar and just find out what you might be doing with regard to the whole Auraria story and what happened there. So we wondered if that was included in your scope.
Yes, it will be included in the scope. That's a big part of this story. So yes, I appreciate you raising that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure. And Jay O'Leary, would you like to ask your question? Feel free to unmute.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. We can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Yeah, but the question I had was, when you guys are completing the project, one of the ways you can utilize the results is by creating neighborhood monographs, so that not everybody might want to know about Hilaria or Swansea, but they may want to know about La Alma or even Westwood individually. That way they don't, you don't have to create a big volumes of material, but you can tailor make the studies to include the neighborhoods, which would also include maybe some of the characters who made up the story, who was involved in the Swansea Hilaria neighborhood, like Lorraine Granado, and what was her role, and who were the other players that were involved in creating that, results of the Arco controversy or whatever, and some of the other neighborhoods that we don't, the neighborhood leaders we don't know about. I'm thinking like over in that same neighborhood, Boogie Mondragon, who was an integral part of that neighborhood, or you go to Westwood where there may be, other members, back in the Sam Sandos days, what did he do? So I mean, the history we may be interested in total, but neighborhoods would only want to know maybe a little bit more about themselves. That's what my comment was directed at.
Thank you, Jay. I think that's a valid point, and I think we don't have the information yet to figure out how we're going to structure the context report, but dividing it into neighborhoods makes a lot of sense. We've talked about different ways of organizing it. I think that's really good, and I also want to say that I think this, and Jenny and I have talked about this a little bit, and Ro as well. This project has limited scope, but can also lead to additional work on our history. And one of the suggestions that was brought up, and your mention of monographs made me think of this. The History Colorado has those very small books, those short books about different pieces of Denver and Colorado history. And our community is completely underrepresented, and I would love to see some work being done and little monographs written about different aspects of Latino and Chicano history. So thank you very much, Jay.
Nikki, if I might be able to jump in there real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, this is, as we had mentioned, a citywide historic context, which will identify specific bits of history in given neighborhoods. And Jay, you make a really good point. One of the things that we're hoping this will help inform, as I'd mentioned earlier, are the neighborhood plans that community planning and development is working on systematically throughout the city. West area plan is one that is nearing the end right now. And so this context can help inform that plan. And through that planning effort, the neighborhood planning effort, we've also been creating specific neighborhood historic context. So it does dig down more into each given neighborhood and the history that it holds. So that's a part of how all these pieces are working together. And I do want to also mention, I know a couple people made some plugs for the La Alma Lincoln Park Historic District that's being proposed right now, which is great. There's been a lot of hard work on that end coming out of landmark preservation, the community, and CPD. That is separate from this project, although the two are connected. So they're a little bit chronologically out of sync. Ideally, you would have something like this Latino Chicano historic context completed first, so that it can then help inform a potential designation for a district or a historic site. So the Alma Lincoln Park Historic District's a little bit ahead of the game. You know, they've already done a lot of work to understand their history and their context. So the two projects are separate, but they do definitely reflect one another and contribute to the ultimate goal for these, which is to make sure that we are recognizing the fuller, more diverse history of the city of Denver.
May I also jump in and add that I Am Denver has been around for 2 years now, and we have done more than 350 stories. And they are stories that include the history of drag in Denver, the Indigenous Peoples Day from the point of view of Indigenous people in the city and county of Denver. During COVID, we really captured a moment in time. We asked residents to do video diaries of what they were experiencing and created more than 25 videos that help to explain how Denverites have been surviving the pandemic. So I encourage you to go to iamdenver.org and to see some of the stories that we're doing. We're working on one now with History Colorado around the Year of La Chicana exhibit that we've interviewed some really great Chicanas, and we'll put that out soon. So while this project is limited in scope and, you know, we'll only be able to cover so much in the few months that we have to work, this is not the be all end all. It is not the end of anything. Hopefully it is the beginning of capturing what we can for this project, but moving forward, planning to cover so many other stories and capture so many other voices that we'll be able to put out as part of the context, as part of these neighborhood projects, as part of the video history of Denver that exists in the I Am Denver archive.
I think that's so important, Ro. You know, I think this context is including a lot. I think we're all very excited about it. And it's really going to provide a guiding document that'll hopefully shoot out to many other wonderful projects associated with it. So it's just one first step, hopefully in a much longer line of other projects that will come.
Thank you. So I think we have time. I got noticed that we have time for one or two more questions. Is there anything else out there that anyone's wondering about? I see a question here from Brianna Gonzalez. Is there a potential opportunity for high school students to participate in any capacity? And Jenny, could you talk a little bit about our plan for the summer?
Sure. And first of all, actually, I spoke with West Early College a couple weeks ago, which was really great to share the project. So absolutely, everybody is able to participate. The survey is the main way to do that. So please feel free to take part in that. And we are working on another engagement piece in partnership with Ro and the work she's done through I Am Denver to really promote the idea of youth engaging their elders in this project. So that's being worked through right now, and we're hoping that's something that we can launch at the end of May, early June. And this will provide a more specific opportunity for people in high school or other youth to participate in the project and to work closely with their elders on the project as well. So it basically is an intergenerational interviewing process. So we'll be getting that information out to you guys as soon as we have it all cooked up, but it would be great to have your participation in that.
Great, thank you, Jenny. And I just want to say thank you to everyone. I'm going to I'll end the Q&A session and turn it over to Jenny, but Again, thank you for your participation and thank you for the little gems that you've shared in the chat. I really appreciate all of the enthusiasm from the community. So I'll turn it over to Jenny right now.
Great, thanks, Nikki. And thank you everybody for all your questions and thoughts. This has been really wonderful. We really want to thank you for your participation and engagement today. Please be sure, if you haven't already gathered, we really want to push this online survey. So please be sure to complete it between now and the end of June and share it with others to do so as well. You can also keep up to date on the project by visiting our website at www.denvergov.org/landmark.